The chapel froze when my mother's voice cut through the air. You changed your name. Not shock, judgment. Every head turned. My father's hand tightened on the program. My brother stopped laughing in the doorway. I slid into the second row seat, the page still warm in my palm, my new name printed in a black that looked almost deliberate. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. That silence didn't begin in the chapel. It began 2,000 miles away, in a sterile high-rise apartment in Seattle, where the rain washes everything gray and the air smells like ozone and antiseptic. My life now is a reflection of that city. Clean. Efficient. Surgical. I live in a world of stainless steel and white coats, a world where mistakes are measured in millimeters and apologies are irrelevant because once you cut, you cannot uncut. On the mantel of my fireplace, inside a vacuum-sealed glass case, sits a stethoscope. It is a Littman Cardiology 4, engraved with the name Kathryn Sterling. I bought it for myself the day I became chief resident. It has never touched a patient. It sits there as a reminder, not of my success, but of the precise moment I decided to excise the gangrene from my life. You see, I didn't always love the cold. I used to crave the heat. I grew up in Nashville, in a house that was always loud, always chaotic, and always revolving around the sun. That was my brother, Tyler. Tyler was a lifestyle entrepreneur, which is a polite way of saying he was unemployed with a trust fund and an Instagram account. My sister, Chloe, was his publicist, unpaid and unappreciated, constantly spinning his failures into learning opportunities. My mother, Patricia, was the director of this circus, and my father, Douglas, was the silent financier. And I was the spare part. The utility player. The one who was smart enough to fix things but not shiny enough to show off. I spent 12 years in medical training. 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 7 years of neurosurgery residency. 12 years of missed birthdays, holidays spent on call, and relationships that withered because I chose the hospital over happy hour. Through it all, I held on to a single, pathetic hope. I imagined that at the end of the gauntlet, when I finally stood on that stage, they would see me. It's a psychological concept called intermittent reinforcement. It's how you train a rat to keep pressing a lever even when no food comes out. You don't starve it completely. You give it a pellet every 100th time. Just enough to keep the hope alive. Just enough to make the rat think, maybe this time. My family dropped pellets. A text from my dad saying good luck before a board exam. My mom buying me a coat one Christmas. Tiny, infrequent scraps of affection that kept me pressing the lever, enduring the neglect, believing that my big moment was just around the corner. That moment was supposed to be my graduation and white coat ceremony. I had reserved 6 seats. The maximum allowed. I fought for those tickets. I traded shifts. I called in favors. I wanted them all there. My parents, Tyler, Chloe, my grandparents. I wanted them to see the dean place the white coat on my shoulders. I wanted them to hear my name read aloud, not as the quiet sister, but as a doctor of medicine. The ceremony started at 10 in the morning. At 9:45, my phone was silent. At 9:55, I checked the family group chat. Nothing. I sat in the front row, surrounded by classmates who were waving to their families in the balcony. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, telling myself there was traffic. Nashville traffic is terrible. They were just late. They would burst in any minute, loud and chaotic, and I would be annoyed, but I would be happy. At 10:15, my name was called. I walked across the stage. The lights were blinding. I looked out into the dark auditorium, scanning the third row, center. 6 empty chairs. They stared back at me like missing teeth. I took my diploma. I shook the dean's hand. I smiled for the official photo. And then I walked off stage, went to the bathroom, and checked my phone. There was a notification from Instagram. Tyler had gone live. I opened the app. The video was shaky, loud, bass-heavy music thumping in the background. It was a brunch party. A rooftop bar in downtown Nashville. There was a banner that said, Tyler's Vibe Launch. He was launching a filter app. An app that added sunglasses to your selfies. I watched the screen, numb. There was my mother, holding a mimosa, laughing at something Tyler said. There was my father, paying the tab. There was Chloe, holding the ring light. They weren't in traffic. They weren't lost. They were 3 miles away, celebrating a filter, while I was accepting the culmination of 12 years of blood and sleepless nights. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen. I looked at the timestamp on the video. It started at 10 o'clock. Exactly when I was walking on stage. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I felt a strange sensation wash over me, cooling my skin, slowing my heart rate. It was the same feeling I get in the operating room when a vessel bursts. Panic is useless. Emotion is a liability. You simply assess the damage, clamp the artery, and remove the defect. I realized then that I wasn't a daughter to them. I was an option. And I was done being optional. I walked out of the bathroom, bypassed the reception, and took a taxi back to my apartment. I packed 2 suitcases. I left the furniture. I left the clothes I didn't need. I left the graduation gifts they had mailed me weeks ago, generic gift cards, unsigned. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't write a letter. I didn't send a text accusing them of betrayal. That would have been noise, and they loved noise. They thrived on drama because drama meant they were important. Instead, I opened the state government website. I searched for petition for change of name. I downloaded the PDF. I filled it out in black ink. Current name, Kathryn and Miller. Proposed name, Kathryn Helen Sterling. Sterling. Cold. Valuable. Hard. I didn't stop there. I logged into the National Provider Identifier database. I pulled up the forms to transfer my medical license to Washington State. I contacted the Board of Neurosurgery. I began the process of scrubbing Kathryn Miller from the professional record. There is a profound safety in bureaucracy. People think of red tape as annoying, but when you are trying to disappear, red tape is a fortress. A judge doesn't ask if your mother is sorry. A judge doesn't care if your brother didn't mean to hurt you. The legal system is binary. Signed or unsigned. Filed or unfiled. Approved or denied. It doesn't gaslight you. It doesn't make promises it can't keep. It just executes the command. I built a wall of paper between me and them. I changed my social security details. I set up a new LLC for my contracting work. I routed all my mail to a P.O. box in a different zip code. I blocked their numbers, but not before I archived every voicemail and text, saving them in a folder labeled evidence, just in case. It took 3 months to fully become Dr. Sterling. In that time, my mother called twice. Once to ask if I could lend Tyler money for rent because the app wasn't monetizing yet. Once to ask why I hadn't liked her Facebook post about the launch party. She never asked about graduation. She assumed I was sulking. She assumed I would get over it, like I always did. She assumed I was still the rat, waiting for the pellet. She didn't know the rat had left the cage. When the final court order came through, stamped with the seal of the state, I felt a phantom weight lift off my chest. I was legally a stranger to them. If they called the hospital asking for Kathryn Miller, the operator would truthfully say, "There is no one here by that name." If they hired a private investigator, the trail would end at a dissolved identity. I moved to Seattle the next week. I joined a private practice that specialized in high-risk tumors. I worked 80 hours a week. I bought the stethoscope. And I waited. I knew, with the certainty of a surgeon, that eventually, the rot in my family would spread. Tyler would fail. The money would run out. And sickness, real sickness, doesn't care about Instagram filters. It took 5 years. I was in my office, reviewing an MRI of a thalamic glioma, when my receptionist buzzed in. Dr. Sterling? You have a referral from Tennessee. It's marked urgent. I didn't look up from the screen. I'm booked until November. Send them to Vanderbilt. They insisted on you, doctor. They said the specialist in Nashville told them you were the only one who could handle the complexity. It's a glioblastoma. Stage 4. I froze. The mouse hovered over the dark mass on the screen. Name? I asked, my voice flat. Douglas Miller, she said. And his wife, Patricia, is on the line. She sounds hysterical. I swiveled my chair around and looked out at the gray Seattle skyline. The rain was falling in sheets against the glass. Tell them to send the files, I said. I'll review them. I hung up. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness. I felt the cold, sharp precision of a scalpel entering skin. The twist wasn't that they found me. The twist was that they didn't know they had found me. They were looking for Dr. Sterling, the savior. They had no idea they were begging for the daughter they had left in an empty auditorium. My head nurse, Sarah, met me in the corridor. She had that tight, polite expression she wears when patients are being particularly entitled. The family in consult room B, she said, keeping pace with my stride. They're agitated. The wife is complaining about the wait time, even though they're 20 minutes early. The son asked if we had a VIP menu. And the husband looks like he's about to bolt. I didn't break stride. Standard protocol, Sarah. Vitals, history, consent forms. I tried, doctor. They said they won't speak to the help. They only want Dr. Sterling. I stopped. I looked at the closed door of room B. It was a heavy oak door, designed to muffle the sounds of bad news. Behind it sat the architects of my trauma, reduced now to anxious people in a room that smelled of disinfectant. Okay, I said. I'll handle it. I took a breath. Not a deep, centering breath, just a functional intake of oxygen. I smoothed my white coat. I checked my badge, Dr. K. H. Sterling, Chief of Neurosurgery. I opened the door. The room was silent for a second. Patricia was standing by the window, aggressively typing on her phone. Tyler was slouching in the guest chair, looking bored and expensive in a suit that didn't quite fit. Douglas sat on the exam table, his shoulders hunched, his skin the color of wet ash. They looked up. The recognition didn't happen instantly. They were looking for a savior, a stranger, a god figure named Dr. Sterling. They weren't looking for the daughter they hadn't seen in 7 years. They weren't looking for the girl who used to hold their coats. Patricia squinted. Her hand dropped to her side. Kathryn? The word hung in the air, foreign and heavy. Tyler sat up straight. No way. Douglas just stared, his eyes wide, filled with a sudden, terrified confusion. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I walked to the computer terminal and logged in. Good morning, I said. My voice was the voice I used for board meetings. I'm Dr. Sterling. I've reviewed your scans, Mr. Miller. Kathryn? Patricia took a step forward, her face cycling through shock, then disbelief, and finally, a terrifying, predatory warmth. Oh my God. Kathryn, it is you. We had no idea. It's Dr. Sterling, I corrected. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the screen, pulling up the MRI slices. Please, have a seat. Don't be ridiculous, Patricia said, her voice pitching up into that performative laugh I remembered so well. Douglas, look. It's Kathryn. I told you she was doing well. I told everyone. The lie was so bold, so instantaneous, it almost impressed me. She was rewriting history in real time. She was already calculating how to spin this. My daughter, the hero surgeon. I raised her for this. Mrs. Miller, I said. I turned the monitor so they could see the image. We are not here to catch up. We are here because your husband has a multicentric glioblastoma that is currently compressing his brainstem. If we do not operate within 48 hours, he will slip into a coma he will not wake up from. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tyler scoffed, trying to regain some ground. Okay, so you're a doctor now. Cool. Does that mean we get the family discount? Because this place charges for parking, which is a scam, by the way. I looked at Tyler. He looked tired. His eyes were red-rimmed. The golden boy had rusted. There are no discounts in neurosurgery, Tyler, I said. The parking validation is at the front desk. I turned back to Douglas. He hadn't spoken. He was looking at me, really looking at me, for the first time in my life. He wasn't seeing his daughter. He was seeing the person holding the knife. Can you fix it? He whispered. His voice was a rasp. I can resect 90% of the tumor, I said. It is a high-risk procedure. There is a chance of stroke, paralysis, or cognitive deficit. But without it, you have 3 weeks. Patricia rushed to the table, grabbing Douglas's hand, performing the role of the devoted wife. Of course she can fix it, Douglas. She's our daughter. She's brilliant. We always knew she was special, didn't we? I felt a flash of heat, a single spark of the old anger. You didn't know. You didn't care. You left me in an empty auditorium. But I extinguished it instantly. Anger is engagement. Anger implies I still need them to be better. I don't. I need you to sign the consent forms, I said, sliding the clipboard across the stainless steel table. And I need to be clear. I am not your family today. I am your surgeon. If you are uncomfortable with that, I can arrange a transfer to Vanderbilt. They have an opening next week. No, Douglas said quickly. He grabbed the pen. His hand was shaking. No transfer. You do it. He signed. He signed his life over to the person he had discarded. Patricia looked at me, her eyes wet, pleading for a connection, for a shared moment of emotion she could feed on. Kathryn, honey, after this, we have so much to talk about. We've missed you so much. I took the clipboard. I checked the signature. It was valid. The nurse will be in to prep you for admission, I said. I'll see you in the or tomorrow morning. I walked out. I didn't look back. I closed the door on their voices, and the silence of the corridor rushed back in, cool and clean. The night before the surgery, I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious about the procedure, I had performed craniotomies 100 times, but because I was calibrating my own mind. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, dissecting the moral dilemma that had been placed in my lap. I held my father's life in my hands. It would be so easy to make a mistake. A tremor. A slip. A millisecond of hesitation near the motor cortex. No one would know. The tumor was aggressive, complications were expected. I could let him die on the table, and it would be a tragedy, but it would be a blameless one. It would be the ultimate revenge. But as the sun rose over the sound, painting the room in gray light, I realized that wasn't revenge. That was intimacy. To kill him would require passion. It would require hatred. It would mean that his life still held enough weight to force my hand. It would mean I was still the daughter acting out of hurt. The true victory wasn't destruction. It was indifference. There is a concept in ethics, the justice of the sower. You plant the seeds, you tend the crop, not because you love the dirt, but because you are a farmer. You do the work because the work is what defines you, not the soil. I would save him. Not because he was my father. Not because he deserved it. But because I was Dr. Sterling, and Dr. Sterling does not lose patience to spite. I would save him to prove that his neglect had not broken me. I would save him to prove that my talent was mine, cultivated in the dark, without their water or their light. I walked into the scrub room at 6 a.m. The ritual of scrubbing in is meditative. The water is hot. The soap is harsh. You scrub from fingertips to elbows, 5 minutes, methodical, rhythmic. You wash away the outside world. You wash away Kathryn Miller. I entered the OR. The patient was already draped. All I could see was the square of shaved scalp, painted orange with iodine. It wasn't Douglas. It wasn't a father. It was anatomy. It was a problem to be solved. Scalpel, I said. The instrument slapped into my palm. Heavy. Balanced. I made the incision. The skin parted. I clamped the bleeders. I drilled the burr holes. The sound of the drill was a high-pitched whine that filled the room, drowning out the memory of loud music and brunch parties. I opened the dura. The brain pulsed gently, a rhythmic beat of life. I found the tumor. It was ugly, vascular, wrapping itself around the healthy tissue like a parasite. It reminded me of them. I began the dissection. For 6 hours, I didn't think. I flowed. My hands moved with a precision that felt separate from my body. I navigated the delicate structures of the brain, teasing the tumor away from the vessels, preserving the self, removing the sickness. At one point, a vessel ruptured. The monitor alarm blared. Suction, I ordered. Bipolar. I didn't panic. My pulse didn't jump. I cauterized the bleed. I controlled the chaos. In that moment, looking down at the exposed brain of the man who had ignored my existence, I felt a profound, icy sense of power. He was completely helpless. He was entirely at my mercy. And I was giving him his life back, not with a warm hug or a tearful reunion, but with cold, hard competence. I was the sower. He was just the dirt. Tumor is out, I said. Hemostasis is good. I began the closure. I stitched the dura. I secured the bone flap. I stapled the skin. Close up, I told the resident. I'll dictate the operative note. I stripped off my gown and gloves. They were stained with his blood. I tossed them into the biohazard bin. I walked out of the OR and went to the dictation room. I recorded the details of the surgery in a monotone voice. Patient tolerated the procedure well. Prognosis is guarded but optimistic. I sat there for a moment in the quiet. I checked my pulse. 60 beats per minute. Steady. I had just performed a miracle for a man who wouldn't have driven across town to watch me receive an award. And the best part? I didn't feel proud of him. I didn't feel connected to him. I felt like I had finished a shift. I stood up, grabbed my coffee, and went to find the family. Not to celebrate, but to settle the bill. The patient in room 4B woke up 24 hours later. His speech was slurred, his movement weak, but he was alive. The tumor was gone. The architecture of his brain was intact. I stood at the foot of his bed. Patricia was holding his hand, weeping performative tears. Tyler was eating a bag of vending machine chips in the corner. When they saw me, the air in the room shifted. It became thick with expectation. They looked at me not just as a doctor, but as a prodigal daughter returning home with a miracle in her pocket. They thought this was the beginning of the movie where we hug, cry, and credits roll over a Thanksgiving dinner. Kathryn, Douglas rasped. He tried to smile. It was lopsided. You saved me. I resected the tumor, I corrected. The post-operative MRI is clean. Patricia beamed, standing up and moving toward me as if to embrace me. I took a precise step back. She froze. Oh, honey, she said, her voice trembling with that manufactured sweetness. We are just so proud. I was telling Tyler, only our Kathryn could do this. We know we have a lot of catching up to do. When Dad is better, we were thinking, maybe you could come back to Nashville. Or we could look at condos here. We need to be a family again. There it was. The rewrite. The erasure of 12 years of neglect, the erasure of the empty auditorium, simply because I was useful again. They wanted to consume my success just like they had consumed my silence. I reached into the pocket of my white coat. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out a thick envelope. "This contains your discharge summary," I said, placing it on the bedside table. "And a list of oncologists in Tennessee who can handle your chemotherapy and radiation. I have already forwarded your file to them." Patricia blinked. "Tennessee? But, aren't you going to handle his recovery?" "No," I said. "My job is surgery. The surgery is complete." "But you're his daughter," Douglas whispered. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had let me walk alone across every stage of my life. I looked at the brother who had laughed while I packed my bags. I looked at the mother who had chosen a brunch party over my doctorate. "I am Dr. Sterling," I said. The words felt like iron. "Kathryn Miller died in an empty auditorium 7 years ago. You didn't attend the funeral." The silence that followed was different than the silence in the chapel. It wasn't shocked. It was hollow. It was the sound of a vacuum where their power used to be. "I have also authorized the billing department to process your insurance," I continued, keeping my voice perfectly level. "The copay and the out-of-network fees will be substantial. You can arrange a payment plan at the front desk." Tyler stopped chewing. "Wait, you're charging us?" "This is a hospital, Tyler. Not a charity." I turned to the door. "Kathryn." Patricia cried out, desperation finally cracking her mask. "You can't just leave us like this. We're your family." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "No," I said. "You're just my patients. And you're discharged." I walked out. I walked to the nurse's station. Sarah was there, watching me with wide eyes. "The patient in room 4B is stable," I said. "Transfer him to the general ward. I am removing myself from the case. Do not page me for this family again." "Yes, doctor," she said softly. I took the elevator down. I walked through the lobby, past the valet stand, and out into the Seattle night. It was raining, a cold, steady drizzle that soaked through my coat. I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. I drove in silence, listening to the tires on the wet pavement. When I got to my apartment, I poured a glass of water and stepped out onto the balcony. The city was a grid of lights below me, millions of lives intersecting and separating. The air was cold and clean. I thought about the stethoscope in the glass case. I thought about the 6 empty chairs. For years, I had thought that silence was a punishment. I thought it was the sound of being unwanted. But standing there, 30 floors above the world, I realized I was wrong. Silence isn't empty. It's space. It's room to breathe. It's the quiet that comes after the machine stops screaming. I didn't kill them. I didn't destroy them. I just outgrew them. I became something they couldn't reach, couldn't understand, and couldn't hurt. The phone in my pocket buzzed. A text from a blocked number. I didn't look at it. I dropped the phone onto the table and watched the rain wash the screen. I took a sip of water. It tasted like victory. If you've ever had to become a stranger to save yourself, share this story. And if you are still waiting for them to show up, maybe it's time to stop waiting and start walking.